Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cost Management Center podcast. Today we have a special guest, in fact, very special because it is our first guest and a person I used to work with, have a lot of respect for, is Sanjeev Garg, and he is the CIO of Global Technology Services. Welcome, Sanjeev.
Thank you, Dwayne. Very nice to be here. I'm glad to be here, and congratulations on your podcast and your book. I know, in the past we have worked together, and this is one of your, dream projects. I'm happy you're there. Congratulations.
I appreciate the book plug. That was very, very timely, right at the beginning. Perfect. All right. I want to start with just a little bit about your background, kind of your journey, your professional journey of what you've seen, how you got to your current position. So as much as you care to share with the audience here.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I am currently the Senior Vice President and CIO at ORBCOMM, which is an IoT company. But I've been in IT industry now for 25 plus years, almost 30 years. And I consider myself like a, born and bred tech person, right? I have a computer science, master's in computer science. I have a bachelor's in computer engineering. So I'm, all tech. Right? As the career goes, I have, I have kind of evolved in my career over the time. But I've worked for several B2B and B2C companies. I kind of specialize overall in bringing different groups together, really initiating large-scale digital transformation type of initiatives.
Yes.
So I've grown in that channel over the last couple of years, and I've been fortunate enough to get good opportunities and being able to work with very good people like yourself, and being able to come through the career ladder to where I am today.
Fantastic. And I appreciate, I think you corrected me because you're with ORBCOMM now, because I think I stole your company name off of LinkedIn, and I think is it dated?
No, I believe I did update it. I'll double check. I'm
Okay.
pretty sure
All
I
right.
had
Well,
updated it on the top, right?
sounds great. Okay. All right. Well, I want to tell you a little bit of a story, and want to see if this is your experience as well. So back in like the 2000s, I ran into circumstance where I often clashed with our technology executives because they always wanted more. There was not enough technology, no matter whatever they needed, they wanted a budget for those type of things. And so it was constantly trying to rein them in a little bit there, or trying to get their help to manage things. And they were, and the whole technology and leadership aspect was just more. And then about, I want to say, a decade or so ago, that started changing. And all of a sudden, I even think, and this is, and you were a great example of this when we started working together, that the technology leadership really were worried that they had too much technology to manage. They weren't really getting the budgets they needed to manage those type of technologies. And maybe what I always refer to as a technology bloat. And all of a sudden, I went from having a tenuous relationship with technology leadership to actually a great alliance with my technology partners, because they too were trying to manage the amount of technology they had out there, their costs on that. It was a lot more focus on that. So I wanted to say if that's similar to your journey, and also whether you're seeing any change to that more recently because of the emergence of AI. Is technology back in vogue and more, or is it that's not really how companies are looking at it now?
No, I think that's a great question, a great point. And I think I'll point to our relationship, in the previous role. I think you and I work extremely well together, and we had pretty shared objectives and goals in terms of what we want to achieve, and we achieved them, right? Which was even a better news, right?
Right.
But the point you make is very, very valid, right? And I think I'll point to like two changes which has happened in the industry since. First, there has been a large amount of consolidation, lot of acquisitions, M&A, divestitures kind of activities. So literally, I think last 3 companies I've worked for, I've inherited a technology stack which came through various acquisitions.
Yeah.
So you end up with multiple ERPs, multiple CRM systems, so on and so forth. So when you look at it, the ecosystems become so complex that you want to then move towards a strategy of consolidation, of consolidating your business processes, technologies. So by definition, it starts moving towards, well, let's reduce the technology stack, not necessarily increase it. Let's pick one of each versus multiple of each. So that's kind of reason number one. I think equally important, the second reasoning is, keeping AI aside for a second, the industry as a whole, I think, has evolved around few very select leaders in the technology space. If you are CRM, you're very likely Salesforce.
Yes.
If you are doing databases or something of that nature, you are either a Google shop or a Microsoft shop. You are either
Hmm.
a SQL shop or Oracle shop or Databricks. No, so they are the functionality is now focused on very few top tier vendors. And because they're all subscription based, it's easy to get in. So it used to be that if you wanted to deploy SAP, well, forget it, right? Unless you're a
Yeah, it was a
multi-billion
huge
dollar
investment.
company, it's a huge investment. But
Hmm.
with subscription model, the entry cost is very less. So even if you're a small company, you're easily affordable. You can go buy 10 licenses or 100 licenses from SAP and get in there.
Right.
I think those are the reasons why I believe the point you make is very valid, but that's the reason there's a great synergy between procurement heads and IT heads in
Right.
terms of getting to that technology stack and keeping the costs minimized.
Yeah. And you brought up a couple of things that I want to drill down on a little bit there, because it's one of the things I talk about in my book. One of the reasons that I see a lot of issues with technology overlap is through acquisitions, just as you mentioned, where as a company's acquired, and I understand why this happens, that they have deeply invested in some technologies, deeply integrated those technologies, and the lift to try to move them to a common technology stack is immense. And in many cases, they're so worried about the disruption to that business that they leave it alone. And they say, they don't necessarily have a time frame in mind, but before you know it, it's permanent, or you
Right.
now have a permanent overlap or a redundant system that you just don't have the time, the resources in order to try to consolidate. When you run into circumstances like that, everyone has a limited round of resources. So now if you decide you want to tackle some of these integrations that have been left over for many cases a decade, and accumulated, are you finding you're able to get the budget and the resources for those particular projects? Do you end up having to fall in line like everybody else did, and slowly but surely just adopt and keep these systems redundant?
Great question, Dwayne. And the position I normally take is, we need to transform. I think that's where the digital transformation starts really.
Hmm.
And and I've been fortunate enough to report into CFO and CEO level of individuals who, in my experience, have been very open to a thought process. So it requires a discussion. You have to do your homework in the sense that what is the real cost of having these multiple technologies? What is the real cost of not having a centralized enterprise-wide business process? What is the real cost of managing these integrations?
Hmm.
What's this running a transformation project where you will consolidate, go through the pains, but the ROI on that invariably is far higher than trying to maintain and keep everything in status quo. So I think in every orgs I have worked for in my, at least in my last three places, I've seen that very consistent thing where I've inherited, a team, a business process, an ecosystem which is totally disjointed and fragmented, and people are in status quo mode. This is how we had done it. We are happy with it. Let it be. And I've always championed a project, an initiative with KPIs, with ROIs, to justify actually executing on a digital transformation strategy where we do get to a single enterprise-wide process. And just what's last thing on that point is just the messaging has to be clear. The messaging should be around, less about technology, more about unifying the business process and the benefit for it to the customer and to your, sales org and marketing org
Right.
and
It's
finance
not
org.
just financial. It's about
It's
efficiency and operation, even the customer experience.
Right. In
Yeah.
many cases, I have, my ROI will show that there's no net saving. You are pretty much moving one licensing to the other, but the savings come from, the fact that you have a unified process and therefore your customer experience is better.
Mm.
So if you
Yeah.
drive it through experience, is where you get an okay, and you get the budgets and you get the support from the executive suite.
Yeah. And you said sometimes it's from an ROI standpoint, it's break even. And many times I guess I see those as being like, even when there is a payback, it's years out.
It is.
And that some leadership, when you have a whole stack of potential investments that are being sought after, that you only have the funding really to pursue 25% of them, something that makes a lot of sense, that has a payback period of 4 or 5 years down the line, this doesn't always rise to the top of that stack. So I'm actually relieved I'm hearing from you that you've had some good success in and leadership supporting your initiatives to consolidate different systems, even if they're not immediately profitable or even have an ROI that is positive.
Or break even. I think I
Yeah,
have made business cases and very successfully got approvals for good budgets and good timelines
yeah,
in favor of doing projects like these,
yeah,
because I'm driving the discussion through customer experience and efficiency and productivity, as
yeah.
opposed to simply saying, hey, if we shut down this, we'll save $100,000 or something like that.
Okay, makes sense. Another thing you mentioned earlier, I thought was interesting that I wanted to dive a little deeper into is you talked about kind of the entry level because of the SaaS model is much lower than it used to be as far as the initial investment. But I also feel in many ways that's the catch, and that's how
It
they
is.
get you.
Yeah.
Yes, the year one or year two might be much more reasonable than the old methodology, where you basically paid a lot more investment up front. But in the long run, that once they have that revenue stream, you're stuck and you're committed. It's a little bit of a slow bleed where the old model, you were generally moved to paying for perpetual licenses, you paid more maintenance, and so the cost wasn't as painful after the initial implementation, and now it lingers much longer. Would you say that's correct?
Absolutely. And I think, and I'm sure we'll talk about AI in few minutes, but,
Sure.
with AI, it will become even more complicated. But for right now, I think the term I think you used, or we used to say also, is SaaS sprawl,
Right.
right? It's the entry point is so minimal at this point that you can actually pretty much put your credit card, and start
Hmm.
using a product of some sort without really involving IT, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's where, and you and I worked on it as well. I call them gates, right? The gating control, the governance is important.
Right.
As a playbook, when I take over a team or join a new company, one of the things I invariably end up doing is putting a gate in my procurement process, where I'm the gatekeeper for any technology purchase. If you're buying something new, it requires an IT approval of some sort. Even if you charge something to your credit card, I would typically work through finance organization controllers. If they see something like that coming through the credit card processing, I want a gate factor there. So that's a couple of ways where you have to put some governance around managing that SaaS sprawl. The other thing is just having like an enterprise architect role of some sort, who's looking at it holistically and saying, what capabilities do we have in the products which we own currently, and how much overlap that brings to something you're trying to purchase because you like it, or you have used it at your previous role, therefore you want it.
Right.
So I think
Right.
those are the two things: enterprise architecture and putting
Yeah.
some governance and gates, which allows us to, techniques I've used to limit the spend, put some control over it.
Good points. We've talked a little bit around budgets, but I want to get a little more specific now. Now, would you say technology budgets, for a while there, I would say back in the 2000s, they were rising very rapidly. I think a lot of companies were very comfortable investing more and more in technology, and so every year the technology budget probably outpaced most other departments. And then that started to level off, and I think that there started to be pressure to say technology, you have to do more with less. And that kind of became a little bit more of a theme. Where are things now, and where do you feel like, and where does AI fit into that? Are you given more budget for new technologies, or are you expected to do more with less? And is AI, they expect AI, sure, they'll pay for that up front, but they actually expect you to recoup the cost some
Yeah,
other way through headcount or some other means?
I think great question. So I think it's a yes and no for a lot of those things you mentioned. I think overall costs are generally increasing, but it depends on which industry vertical you are in. If you're a tech company, you tend to have a higher cost. It's normal for a tech company to have, some in the vicinity of 6 to 12% at your tech cost of your overall revenue. In other cases, I mean, I've seen it as low as maybe 3.5, 4%,
Okay.
or as high as, maybe 15% of your revenue.
Okay.
But again, as part of my playbook, that's one of the fundamental things I look at. First consolidate all tech costs under one cost center, and then measure it against the revenue, and see where you land on a benchmark for your particular vertical industry. That's one of the benchmarks I always capture and track and report on, in terms of managing that expectation and cost, that we shouldn't be going over a threshold. But the reality of the situation nowadays is, and again, it varies if you're a public company or an like my current company is EP backed company. So, the accounting varies. You have to kind of understand how the accounting works in those particulars in your particular area. But end of the day, any tech organization, and it's true for mine as well, I own a significant portion of the overall company budget as the tech cost. If I include all my hardware, software spend, my consulting spend, my FTE spend, tech is a very big portion of it. And when I say very big, I'm talking 35, 40% kind of big. So when hard times come for a company, revenue, you did not meet revenue and things like that, as a tech leader, you do have an obligation to support the company by reducing that cost because you have such a big chunk of that overall cost, right? So I'm typically the first person a CFO will go to and say, hey, we didn't meet the revenue targets. Yes, we know it's not your fault, but we want to do your part and see where you can trim, right?
Right.
So having that visibility day one in that role is hugely important on where you are spending that money,
Mhm.
how is it going, and what levers can you pull if a situation like this arrives, and invariably it arises, right? So it's better to be prepared for it than
Right.
than to be surprised by it. Right?
Right.
And the last point you made was AI, and I think it's kind of a game changer. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out how to apply that AI. um, in my current role, because we are EP backed, every project we do is kind of a zero budget setup. So in other words, I have to either find the savings someplace or project the savings and track them before I can spend the money.
Okay. So
So
it's they're not willing to make a upfront investment necessarily and say, okay, we understand for 2 or 3 years this AI initiative. They're looking for a much shorter payback period.
exactly. So I'm talking more like 6 months initiative.
Okay.
So
Right.
the way I've sold AI projects, and we can talk a bit more if you like.
Yeah.
um, but they are very much geared towards trial and error, but show the metrics up front. So I could say, hey, I want to invest in this technology. It's going to cost me this upfront. I expect this return in a year.
Okay.
What I'll be asked to do then is, okay, chunk it out, show me the return in 3 months or 2 months. And then if it's on the right trajectory, we'll keep on investing. If it's not heading the right trajectory, we'll stop and we'll do something else. So
Okay.
I think that narrative works well with C-suite, where they're seeing some returns earlier versus making a long range commitment of a couple of years
Okay.
before they will see the returns. And
Okay.
yeah, I think falls in that bucket very well.
Okay. And are you finding, because you mentioned that you go to leadership with an AI solution, are you finding that other departments and other executives are coming to you with AI solutions, or generally you are the one that is expected to kind of come up with the thought process and ideas for how to implement AI?
Yeah, it's a mix. So I mean, I think literally every vendor out there has an AI offering now. If you're a software vendor, you must have.
Yep.
So what happens invariably is a lot of these vendors are approaching the C-suite or people they connect with in the company, and they are trying to sell them their AI suite. Right. So as a tech leader, you have to put again governance around it in terms of where to invest, what to do, what not to do. And I established kind of those three pillars on how we evaluate an AI technology within the company and make a decision whether we should invest in a particular AI technology or not.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of one venue. The second venue is we do promote internally through hackathons. We do,
Mm-hmm.
every
Yeah.
6 months we do hackathons
Yeah.
where we allow that creativity to come from individuals, and some very good idea comes out of hackathons. If your audience are not participating or organizing hackathons, I would definitely
Okay.
say go
Good.
do that. Right.
Good.
So that's the second venue where you get good ideas. And the third is more, I do like workshop brainstorming kind of sessions where I'm working with individual groups, say finance or say sales or marketing or customer support, whoever, to emphasize that not doing AI is not an option anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do it in the right places. So let's get together and talk about what are your pain points or use cases where we can potentially apply AI. So those are the three venues I typically go after to figure out, to create kind of a laundry list of what we should be doing.
Yeah.
And then I deploy a process to prioritize budgets, calculate all that stuff to come up with, okay, these are 3 things we're going to focus on.
Okay, very very helpful. Staying on the AI theme, what applications do you that might you hold out as being superior in AI right now versus others? Because I feel like you mentioned, every application is claiming AI. They're all investing money in it, and therefore they want to pay back, and so they're going to want to push that to their customers. But the varying levels of usefulness to a customer. What's your, even if you could name some that you think have been very successful? I won't make you badmouth the ones that haven't been. So maybe we'll just we'll stay with compliments for those that you think have added value, that have done a great job with AI.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? And there was a study done by McKinsey which talked about, how this software area has evolved over the years.
Yeah.
And it talked about, and we just discussed it, that, majority of the functionality nowadays is focused on some of these top tier software vendors, Salesforce, AWS is a clear leader,
Mhm.
Workday in
Yeah.
HR, companies like that. The irony is, on the AI side, there is no such company today.
Mm.
It's evolving. So, it's expected that over next year or two, there'll be unicorns which will develop, who will allow this to happen more rapidly. They will become the Salesforce of yesterday.
Right.
So those unicorns don't exist today, to
Right.
be very frank. It's, the market is very fragmented, very open, and literally new vendors are stepping in every single day.
Okay.
What is also expected is, it's very likely none of the current leaders in those spaces would actually be the leader in the AI space.
Yeah. Isn't that
It's
interesting?
more likely that there'll be new vendors who will come and occupy that
Yeah.
space versus the existing vendors evolving and becoming the leaders in AI space.
Right.
So to answer your specific question, I'm not actually hedging my bets on a particular vendor.
Right.
What I'm trying to do is look at it by, by areas where I can definitely provide an ROI, right? So for example, customer support is one area where literally every company is investing in AI-based agent, chatbots, all those things, right? Sentiment analysis, all those things I'm deploying and building and seeing a KPI-based ROI on it. But similarly, on the development side, right? Every company out there is deploying, co-pilot kind of functionality to aid coding and increase productivity,
Right.
right? So this year I'm aiming for a 30% productivity across my developer base. Next year I'll be at 60 to 70% productivity using these tool sets, right? Creative writing is the third area where, if you're doing, PR releases or product initiation, stuff like that, you would want to use AI to accelerate your deployments, to accelerate your timeline, accelerate your go-to-market strategies. So those are 3 areas where I see a lot of AI usage and a lot of return on investment. All other areas I believe are coming up rapidly, like finance and HR and marketing,
Yep.
and they're coming up rapidly, but they are in, I would call them, they are in experimentation phase right now.
Yeah. You might be thinking along these same lines. I had read a book called Latent Vector, and it was very by someone else that I'd worked with many years ago, and I thought they had an interesting perspective where basically they were saying, look, when AI just captures everything within a document, within a call, it captures everything,
Right.
and so the need to have things like an ERP system, a sales CRM system, those different things really go away, because
Sure.
what you really need are prompts of how to get the and scripts on how to get the information out in the format that you want them. And in fact, AI could probably sometimes tell you give you more valuable information than you probably request on your own. It can tell you what you ought to look at. And so it was kind of an interesting aspect where they were saying that over time, all these monsters, that had developed, they were the kings of SaaS, the Salesforces of the world, and the Workdays of the world, and stuff like that. We're gonna really struggle in the long run because from AI. Would you agree with that, or is that being a little bit too far in the future, and that Workday and Salesforce will develop enough AI that they can still, as an application, they are still rule their particular segments?
It's an interesting thought, and I've read a lot about, kind of that thought
Yeah.
process. And My personal opinion is it's going to evolve towards that. It'll be
Okay.
in phases. It'll get there definitely, I think,
Yeah.
but it'll be in phases.
Okay.
So a good example of that is, today, if you're an employee of a company and you need to, let's say, file expenses, right? Either as part of your onboarding or through your intranet or something, you would want to know where to go. Well, I have to go to this Concur site and I have to go click an SSO and log in and this, right? Versus if you want to say, I want to put my time off, you have to know that if you go to the HR system, all that. What I see evolving towards is AI will help us bridge those gaps.
Hmm.
So in phases, phase one perhaps would be more like, you know, as an employee, I don't need to know. I can go to an interface, a common looking interface, and say, hey, file my expenses in the following manner. System will know which, that it has to go to Concur and do something, and they will present you the right screens to approve and stuff like that.
Right.
So it'll help you with productivity and will bridge the gap between the technology and the myriad of UI interfaces we deal with today, and would homogenize that user experience internally. Over time, I do believe that slowly but steadily, the backends will also dissolve into an AI based solution
Mm.
versus a CRM and an ERP and these
Hmm. Right.
designated verticals. I think they will gray out over time, and they will get mixed up into one AI based solution.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was thinking
And
as
that's where I
well.
think the unicorns, that's where we are waiting for these unicorns in AI area to come up,
Right.
because I think that's where the industry will move towards in terms of who comes up with that first solution, and then
Right.
who then builds on it.
Yeah, it's gonna
That's
really,
the
it really has could change things quite significantly.
it is.
You talked a little bit about how, and I've heard this across the board, where the cutbacks in developers related to AI, because AI can be very powerful in that way. And it's interesting. I've talked to some friends that are at companies, and they're just saying that it's become very tough because all of a sudden when they have to cut 20% of the staff or something like that because they don't feel they need that level anymore. Well, it gets very competitive. So what used to be, if you remember, we used to worship developers and they could really command a high price, and we were constantly bringing them in breakfast and everything we could do to to get them to stay with the company and be loyal to their projects. And now he feels like it's almost very rapidly shifted to the other direction, where he's fighting for his job because he knows that 2 out of 10 of those people are going to be gone, and he doesn't want to be one of them. And
Super.
companies are somewhat shifting and treating people a little differently because of that. Do you think that it's going to cap out, or as far as like as AI had most of the progress it's going to have, it's going to be slow and steady from here as far as software development type of roles, or is it still exponentially increasing so that every month, like, yeah, you could got rid of 2 out of 10 this month, and then in 6 more months you can get rid of 2 more. Is it that exponentially increasing, or is it is a little slower, and they've kind of got the low hanging fruit, and now it's going to get a little tougher for AI to do that, the next level of complexity?
Yeah. So I think it's rapidly increasing. Even,
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen most of the AI companies have announced their agent or agentic AI, and
Right.
kind of heading that direction. That increases that foothold you're talking about by almost 1,000-fold, right? If you can effectively use them. But the comment I'll make is, I mean, I think, yes, there'll be impact of AI on developers, no questions about it, right? In fact, you're seeing that in terms of, number of graduates, or number of students entering into computer science colleges and all that. You directly see a correlation there already,
Mhm.
right? I personally feel it's a shift in skill sets. So I think, end of the day, if I'm a technology leader and I'm managing a workforce or a developer workforce of say 100 developers, tomorrow I might have 50 hardcore developers and 50 AI based developers.
Right.
Something that I don't think my total headcounts will change. I
Okay.
think they will shift in skill sets. And the important point there is, AI is not standalone. Somebody has to tell AI to do the right thing.
Right.
And the skill set which is shifting is more about, less about hands-on keyboard coding. It's more about how do you orchestrate an AI to build what you want it to build,
Mhm.
And that's a skill set which will, which will be of higher value in this AI-driven world.
Yeah, I think you brought up a very good point that I've also read about, in the sense that that it doesn't necessarily cut back on your developer cost, but it's really meant to more accelerate your capabilities and your innovation, because you have more resources that you can dedicate to that, and they're not caught up in a lot of the mundane work that now AI can do, and the programming that AI can do.
Yeah. So right now, for example, in my current company, that's exactly what we're doing, right?
Yeah,
We're increasing our capacity to deliver without necessarily increasing our cost.
right.
So by introducing AI, we're introducing productivity in our developers, and therefore if you use the Jira term story points, the number of story points they're committing to is much higher now because
Hmm.
they have AI to help them. And then in turn, we are not hiring as many developers. We're not laying off either, but we're not
Right.
hiring either.
Right.
But at the same time, we are increasing our capacity to deliver the outcomes for the company to accelerate that
Great.
growth.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fantastic. Okay. And do you think, like, I'm harking back a little bit to the early SaaS days, where, we were moving away from a perpetual model, and the SaaS came along. If you remember, that it was the SaaS, they came up with that model as a way to break into
Right.
and break the hold that all those big perpetual models had on the market. And
Right.
they were successful, and they did a great job. But over time, you realize that the SaaS model was not necessarily a cost savings. They just bled you differently. If you don't mind, as a cost guy, I view it that way. Do you is AI have the potential to be the same? Where right now you implement them, it's the ROI is pretty reasonable at first, and you can get in there, but sooner or later, they're going to, because now they're entrenched, that they're going to have pricing power? Or is there enough AI competition where it will be easy to switch between different AI type of solutions? How do you see pricing power, I guess, evolving with AI?
I mean, again, you're absolutely correct. The current models are more to get you in, to allow you to try it.
Right.
And there's a lot of stickiness attached to it, right? So it all depends on how well you architect your thought process, how well you architect your solutions
Right.
to allow for an agnostic, back-end agnostic solution.
Right.
Would you devise a solution? Would you devise or architect a solution in such a way that you can swap out LLMs on behind the scene, for example, right? For a lower cost footprint.
Right.
But in general, I think as the industry moves towards more agentic AI, the licensing complexity is increasing geometrically. And and the reason for that is, as you rightfully said, we went from this model of per CPU, per core to per user. What we are moving towards in agentic AI world is per task
Hmm. Right.
pricing. And that task could be a small, medium, or complex, and each company will define that differently. And you have tokens attached to it. So figuring out what is my current cost and what do I budget for in the future is now going to become even more complex than figuring out Oracle or Microsoft costs.
Right. Right. That is interesting there. Before we move on from AI, because I do want to ask a couple other questions. Are there any particular applications that you think have rolled out their AI in a more superior fashion and have a higher quality in what is true AI functionality than others? Anyone you want to compliment?
I think co-pilots, right? So
Okay.
GitHub co-pilots, all
Sure.
those I think are extremely well done. And
Okay.
when I see the usage of them, including they are it's not just productivity of the developer, it's also the security aspect of it, which is now built into these products, and they're evolving, literally speaking, on a weekly, monthly basis, right? In terms of new functionality, new features, and they are listening, right? Even if you doesn't matter which vendor you go with, whether it's GitHub Copilot or some other, they're all evolving pretty rapidly to capture that market. They want to be that unicorn
Okay.
in the developer space, and they're doing a fabulous job of it, I think.
Oh, fantastic there. Now, as far from a headcount standpoint, you mentioned that you're really not letting people go, and you're not seeing that. But is it? Do you think that most companies? I want to say yours in particular, but most companies, their technology staffing this year will be the same next year, or would you expect that to adjust either up or down?
I think at best it will be same next year.
Okay, flat.
I mean, Yeah,
Hmm.
flat. I mean,
Yeah.
I've already been told it's already October, and I've already told that Sanjeev, next year, you're, yes, we wanted you to do these,
Right.
10 new
Right.
things, but your budget is flat. So go
Yep.
figure out where you will you save, how will you save, but we want the investment, but your budget is neutral.
And I appreciate that, and I probably would say the same, and I probably ask the same of you, but sometimes if I did, the truth is I don't know what I'm asking. I
Yeah.
don't know. Is that realistic? Should I be more presenting to you and say, here's what I want. You tell me what is a realistic ask of this type of thing, because I think sometimes finance and other executives have a tendency to go and approach you and say, hey, this is what your budget is, and this is what we want you to do, as if they have any idea, what of what it will take to do what they're asking.
Right.
So that's a question I always have: is do they have a realistic perspective of that? And I'm not sure. I want you to. Do you want to pass on that, or do you want to? Or feel free to
No,
give me
no,
some
I
input.
again, depends on the executives. Again, I've been fortunate enough to have reported into very keen individuals who understand the technology landscape and can speak the language,
Right.
and know what we're talking about very well. So this is not a BS environment where you can get away by throwing fancy word at somebody. You have to know your stuff, you have to know your numbers, and come up with a strategy which is achievable and deployable.
Right.
What happens in these cases is it generates a pressure on IT leaders like myself. You then allow yourself to go look at things which you perhaps have not looked at before. Right. Especially like in these, sustained costs, like, we are paying, $1 million a year to Salesforce. It comes up for renewal. They come up with a 10% increase. Well, we have to do that because it's cost of doing business.
Hmm.
No, let's dig down. Who is using it? Why are they using it? What can we move around? How can we negotiate? So it's not as simple as saying just go to procurement, just renew, because we got to keep sales first.
Right.
It's more than that, and that's where I think the pressure comes, rightfully so, from the C level down to executives like us to say, go look at it, go pick up that stone, look underneath it, find some savings, because we want you to deliver this, but with zero increase in your budget.
Okay. All right. All right. That sounds good. And are you finding it just because you're not hiring new technology people? A lot of companies are not. You're starting to see even a little bit of unemployment tick up at the post graduate level as people are getting out of college. It's not as easy to find technology type of opportunities or any job. Are you finding it's easier to keep good people? Because that was a big problem for many years, is that there was a lot of turnover within technology, and when they did turnover, you lost so much knowledge of how a particular application or applications were utilized by a company, and it was a big deal to lose people. Are you finding
Right.
that's not as much of a problem?
I think it's more or less same from my point of view, right?
Okay.
Because again, the skill sets and technology might have shifted. So in the
Hmm.
previous day, if I had SAP, holding an SAP person might be difficult for me. Nowadays, if I have some AI person or somebody doing, some business insights into data analytics and data science, and those skills are hot and high, and cloud computing, those skills are very high, and it's difficult to hold those people. So I think again, it might have shifted from one skill to the other, but overall, it's equally hard to keep good people. People who are good, it's hard to keep them.
Right. Okay. Man, it's interesting. So still the same problem, just slight shift in that problem. Okay.
It is.
I want to ask a little bit about kind of vendor management and which applications can sometimes be the most difficult. As a someone who used to have to negotiate with a lot of different SaaS companies, some of my more brutal ones were with Salesforce. Workday was always slightly better. Oracle used to always be bad, but they don't have the leverage and the power they used to. But sometimes that's almost because I avoided and stay away from them because it got so bad that maybe I just wasn't using them as much as we had used to. Are those same behemoths? Because you mentioned that there's few big players that were starting to kind of rule the markets. Are they still pushing, and will they be able to keep pushing around companies and kind of demand what they want on renewals? And are you able to protect yourself through renewal caps and those type of things, or are they're spreading their wings because they know they have the superior product, which no company can really do without?
Yeah, absolutely correct. I think these mega vendors now have such a huge stickiness factor that once you get in, it's extremely difficult for you to get out.
Yeah.
And they know that, right? So it's
Mhm.
not, so that's why the levers you can pull in terms of negotiating this are very far and very few.
Right.
And I think you mentioned that in your book in terms of, the levers you can actually pull in terms of, length of the contract, maybe number of users, early renewal, those kind of techniques you can use. I mean, fortunately or not, I mean, I think the vendors you mentioned, are by far the more complex, right? Oracle is still extremely complex in terms of just their
Mhm.
licensing, the way they make.
Yeah.
Microsoft equally bad in terms of how they manage their queues and how they confuse the hell out of you as to what are you buying from them. um, Salesforce is right up there. Workday is a little bit simpler, but it's getting up there. I think AWS I'll probably put in that bucket as well now. One of your, at least mine, one of our biggest costs right now is
Yes.
cloud.
Yeah.
And AWS is right up there. It's part, by a magnitude higher than all other vendors right now. And I recently negotiated a 3-year agreement with them, and it was a nightmare, right? I mean, it took 4+ months to negotiate that contract. Um, Now, ironically, when I compare what I eventually landed up with, it's, and I compare that against, other portfolio companies, I have the best possible deal. In fact, when I presented that to my EP, they actually bounced that against all the other companies they currently manage. And, my deal was by far the highest amount of discount.
Well,
So,
congratulations. You're gonna get me teary-eyed. All right. Yeah.
so in spite of those challenges, I think it's certainly possible to get more discounts out of these vendors.
Yeah.
But you have to be more strategic. You have to really understand what their levers are and how are they evaluating you as a customer,
Right.
and then work with it to say, how can I turn this around in my favor?
Right. Now, how and AWS and it's interesting because back many years ago when they were first getting out, they were actually made their. It was surprisingly. I used to love AWS in the early days because every 3 or 4 months I get a notice that they're dropping the price of their product. No other vendor sent me that notice. I never got that. It was always the other direction. And now it's interesting as they've evolved and become more of a beast. But they do have good competition out there. They do have Azure and they have other Oracle and other applications that offer strong cloud and processing products. How can they still push themselves, or is it just because companies marry themselves to essentially their knowledge? AWS becomes so strong and they just can't have a different competitor operating that they could start shifting to.
I mean, again, in my role today, in this current role,
Yeah.
we are a hybrid cloud company, right? So I have Azure from Microsoft, I have AWS, I have OCI from Oracle. I run
Yeah.
in all three clouds. Plus, I have data centers as well. So I manage that entire cost framework, right? Again, that's one of the levers, right? Because managing a hybrid cloud skill wise is extremely difficult.
Right.
Having the in-house skills to actually manage hybrid, and then having systems distributed across them, and then maintaining, delivering on things like DR and reliability, uptime, all that cybersecurity becomes becomes a big multiplier, right? Because you can't just deploy one technology. You have to think about, well, how will it work in Microsoft, how will it work in AWS, right?
Yeah.
So that's the reason people typically shy from having a hybrid structure. That's a downside. The plus side is, one of the reasons why I was able to negotiate with AWS is because they knew that I have a hybrid structure and I can technically move my workload from one to the other. So they were more open to a negotiation than perhaps when they know that, this is the only cloud you have. Where else are you going to go?
That's a great. That's a great point, and good on you for having for being able to put some pressure on, because I think a lot of times the companies that don't do that are really at the mercy of the vendor. So it's great that you
Yeah,
put the
believe me,
company in
but
position to put pressure on them.
operating a multi-hybrid cloud is very challenging.
Yes, make
And large systems where I have whatever, one server is sitting in Azure and my other server is sitting in AWS.
yeah.
Database sitting in OCI XRCS, and it has to interconnect, and latency issues, and building DR strategy around it. I mean, it's very challenging when you have these hybrid environments.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, I want to be. We only have a few more minutes because I want to be respectful of your time here, and so I more want to open up to you. Is that as far as from a cost per standpoint, in particular, anything that you think that is worth pointing out that I might not have already hit?
I think you've covered a lot, right? So I mean, I think
Yes. Well, I
You know,
appreciate your.
right. It's a great conversation, and I've learned a lot as well. But I think I would just emphasize the acquisitions, the divestitures, the
Mm,
M&A activities. All those. People do tend to shy away from making big steps, and I think in my experience, controlling that upfront is far better than thinking, well, let's leave it alone for a few months
yeah,
and then we'll come back to it, because you
yeah.
never do.
It'll
Right?
haunt you. It'll haunt you.
And it always become more difficult
Right.
later on than early on. So in literally 100% of the cases where I have dealt with M&A or even divestiture kind of activities, taking that step up front, like day one, keeping a target of saying, hey, day 15th, we are merging HR systems, and day 45, we are merging, financial systems at whatever capacity, at whatever cost, at whatever pain point. I think it's a far better approach from a cost containment point of view
Right.
than trying to do it kicking the stone and we'll come back to in 6 months.
No, I think that's great advice. And as somebody who also is impacted by having to deal with a lot of different vendors doing the same thing in many circumstances, I appreciate technology people that look at it that way, because I
Right.
think there's just an instinct that it's very complicated. It's not bothering anybody. We just leave it alone and hope it go. And hope it no one really notices or it doesn't become a big deal. But I appreciate you tackling the hard problems. Well, Sanjeev, thank you very much for your time in this, and I think you gave a lot of great insight. I could not have picked a better first person to have on the cost management podcast, and I thank you, and hopefully you'll come back again when in a year or so and give us more wisdom as AI continues to evolve.
Absolutely. Well, pleasure meeting you again, and pleasure being on this call. Thank you for the opportunity. And great to see you on the video. We haven't met yet for some time, so we need to pick us up on coffee again.
We're due.
Otherwise, congratulations again on the great podcast and your book.
All right, thank you so much.